Welcome to this explainer. Okay, let's just dive right in because we're looking at a completely fascinating shift in UK policy right now. Today, we're exploring exactly how the new Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, plans to use existing public spending to completely reindustrialize Britain. And honestly, here's the kicker. The goal is to pull this off without spending a single new penny of taxpayer money. It's a massive shift in how the government actually thinks about its own purchasing power, and it's absolutely going to affect every single community in the country. Literally, in his very first speech on the steps of Downing Street, Andy Burnham promised what he called a massive circuit breaker for the UK economy. He pointed out that since the 1980s, political power has been super centralized, while economic power was privatized, which basically left huge parts of the country completely deindustrialized. So what's his fix? Well, it's a new economic model that uses the existing machinery of public procurement to back British industry, put life's essentials back under stronger public control, and, crucially, push power out into every single postcode. All right, so the crucial point to wrap our heads around is this staggering number right here. £400 billion. That is what the UK government already spends every single year buying goods, works, and services. Now, historically, spending this money was mostly just about getting the cheapest possible price for a specific service, right? But this administration, they're looking at that $400 billion not just as a standard purchasing budget, but as an enormous economic lever. The thinking is, if you change the rules on how that money is spent, you can literally shape supplier behavior, support local growth, and drive real innovation across the entire economy.
Section 1. The Manchester model goes national.
To really understand this national strategy, we kind of have to look at the new Prime Minister's blueprint, which comes from his time as mayor of Greater Manchester. There is a totally stark contrast between traditional procurement and this new approach. Under the old system, social value often felt, bolted on. It was a bit performative, A company might promise a few apprenticeships or a random day of litter picking just to sweeten their bid. But the Manchester model asks a much deeper question. What kind of business are you? Public bodies were guided to only contract with organizations that were willing to pay the real living wage and produce credible, actual carbon neutrality plans. It completely shifted the focus from temporary feel-good perks to core business values.
And this breakdown brilliantly illustrates the new math of winning government work. Previously, across much of Whitehall, social value accounted for maybe 10% of a contract's total score, but in Greater Manchester, they bumped that right up to 20%. Now, when a 20% weighting is applied to social value on a multi-million-pound contract, it completely changes the game. A company cannot simply offer the cheapest price anymore. The actual contribution to local jobs, skills, and community opportunities becomes a heavily weighted factor that can literally make or break their chances of winning the bid.
Let's move on to Section 2, backing small British businesses.
This whole strategy isn't just about forcing big corporations to change their ways. The government is introducing actual hurdles to make sure this money reaches the small local enterprises that employ over 60% of the British workforce. Large contracting authorities, so those spending over £100 million a year, will now be forced to publish 3-year targets for their direct spend with small businesses, and they have to report their progress annually. But the real game changer here is the prompt payment rule. Late payments literally lead to roughly 50,000 small business closures a year in the UK. Under these new rules, if a major supplier is bidding for a contract over £5 million and they can't prove they pay their own supply chain within an average of 60 days, they can be entirely excluded from the bidding process. Boom. Out. Now, obviously, the new rules also recognize that a rigid, cutthroat commercial competition isn't always the right tool for the job. For people-focused services, think adult and children's social care, authorities are getting some absolutely crucial flexibilities. Sometimes, forcing local care providers into complex, highly bureaucratic commercial competitions actively damages the quality of the care they provide. So, by removing the need for full competitive procedures in these really specific, sensitive areas, local authorities can prioritize the actual needs of vulnerable citizens over raw commercial metrics. This allows for much longer-term, stable partnerships with local charities and social enterprises.
Section 3, the public interest test.
Okay, before any major public service is just handed over to the private sector, the administration is now asking a fundamental question. Keep in mind, the UK recently spent around £146 billion on outsourced services, and the default assumption was usually just, the private sector can do things cheaper. Well, the new government is totally shifting that paradigm. They're telling authorities to hit the brakes and actively justify why a service shouldn't just be delivered in-house by public sector teams. And this takes the form of the public interest test. For any service contract over £5 million, contracting authorities must now complete this exact rigorous sequence. They have to assess their own in-house capability, evaluate real cost savings versus service quality, and determine if the service is core to their mission. And crucially, they have to publish these results for everyone to see. It's a transparency measure designed to ensure that if something is outsourced, it's because it truly adds public value, not just because it's, the way things have always been done.
Moving right along to Section 4, redefining real social value.
So what does this actually look like when it moves off a Whitehall spreadsheet and into the real world? Here is a super tangible example straight from the source material. Europe's largest waste contract, handled by Suez in Greater Manchester. Because the combined authority applied a 15% social value weighting, the contract went way beyond just collecting bins. Suez actually helped build the Renew Hub. This initiative repairs bikes, furniture, and electrical goods that would have just been thrown in a landfill and puts them back into the community at affordable prices, all while funding local repair cafes. It's a perfect example of public money doing double duty. And hey, the data absolutely backs this up. According to benchmarking data from the Social Value Portal, which looked at around 20,000 public contracts, embedding social value results in a median 16% value add. But for top performers, that jumps to a massive 37% value add. Just think about that for a second. That is up to 37 extra pence of community value delivered for every single pound spent, at literally zero extra cost to the taxpayer. The administration is pointing right at this data as hard evidence that demanding more from suppliers yields incredibly tangible results.
Finally, Section 5, tracking the local impact.
So, with all these sweeping changes kicking effect, how can you see the real-time effects on your specific postcode? To track how these huge localism policies are actually reshaping neighborhoods, you need high-quality local journalism that digs into the council reports that everyone else just completely misses. And that is exactly why you should check out our focus for today, The Londoner. They are doing incredible on-the-ground reporting on this exact topic. If you want to understand exactly how this plays out in the capital, you should absolutely read their dedicated breakdown. Just head over to londoner.news/Andy Burnham Public Procurement Changes. Seriously, make sure to visit londoner.news for all the live updates on how your public money is being spent right in your backyard. All right, I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought to chew on. As £400 billion of public money shifts towards social value channels, local wages, and small businesses, what new opportunities are going to appear right on your doorstep? Are we actually going to see a true reindustrialization of Britain's communities? Keep a really close eye on your local high street and be sure to follow the ongoing story at londoner.news. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning how your money is put to work.